Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Before arriving at Frozen Cloud Asgard, Yoon-chae had thought of various possibilities, but definitely hadn't expected that this powerful and mysterious Grand Asgard mistress would actually want him to become a disciple of Frozen Cloud Asgard. If Yoon-chae agreed, then he would be the first male disciple in all of Frozen Cloud Asgard's history. And judging from Gong Yuxian and Xie Qingyue's reaction, it seemed that they weren't aware of this beforehand. The inside of Yoon-chae's heart began to stir. Speaking on behalf of just himself, he originally didn't have any gratitude nor grievances with Frozen Cloud Asgard, but because of Xie Qingyu and Chu Yuchan, it was destined that he would possess countless ties with Frozen Cloud Asgard. As of now, he no longer belonged to Blue Wind Imperial Palace. Being sectless, he could freely join Frozen Cloud Asgard. And after joining, he and Xie Qingyu would belong to the same sect as husband and wife, and perhaps would no longer have too many constraints when getting along with each other from now on. After finding Chu Yuchan in the future, there would also be the possibility for her to return to Frozen Cloud Asgard. But all these were secondary. What was most important was that from top to bottom, Frozen Cloud Asgard was entirely made up of females. And when Frozen Cloud Asgard selected their disciples, not only do they regard aptitude as important, the requirement of beauty was also extremely high. In addition to the Frozen Cloud Aertes effect, every single one of the Frozen Cloud Asgard's disciples had skin like ice and bones of jade, cherry red lips, and flawless features. Any of the disciples would be considered extraordinary precious beauties in the outside world. The number one beauty of the Blue Wind Empire had almost always came from Frozen Cloud Asgard as well. Just speaking from this aspect, Frozen Cloud Asgard was undoubtedly a paradise that men craved even in their dreams. If Frozen Cloud Asgard were to openly recruit male disciples, it could be said without any doubt that the entire Blue Wind would experience a major earthquake. And now, this paradise in men's dreams had actually opened the gates for him. Moreover, it was there the first time opening the gates to a man throughout history. As an extremely normal man physiologically and psychologically, to say that Yoon-chae wasn't excited was impossible. However, he was extraordinarily calm on the surface of his face, as he asked with a very indifferent tone, "Junior is currently not in any sects, and there will be no problems in joining Frozen Cloud Asgard, but Junior needs to know first, after joining Frozen Cloud Asgard, what will I need to do, and what will I receive?" Feng Qianhui understood very well how attractive Frozen Cloud Asgard was to men, and seeing that Yoon-chae's reaction was so indifferent, she secretly praised him in his heart, then said, "After joining my Asgard, you do not need to deliberately do anything, and do not even need to follow the sectoral rules. You do not need to stay within the Frozen Cloud Asgard all the time either, and can completely go and come as you wish. What you need to do are only two things. Firstly, is to not do things against good morals and nature in Frozen Cloud Asgard's name. Secondly," Feng Qianhui paused for a second, as her expression became extremely solemn, "someday, if Frozen Cloud Asgard faces calamity, as disciple, I hope that you can defend Frozen Cloud Asgard with all your strength." As she spoke to hear, Feng Qianhui's speech stopped. Yoon-chae, who was listening, raised up his head with a surprised expression, then probingly asked, "That is all?" "Yes, that is all," Feng Qianhui said with a gentle tone. "As for what you will receive, since you are to be my Frozen Cloud Asgard's disciple, then you may study all profound arts of my Asgard, including Frozen Cloud Arts, Frozen Heart Arts, Frozen Snow Dance Steps, Frozen Cloud 13 Sword Styles, as well as Frozen End Divine Arts. I will allow you to use sectoral resources as you wish, and you may also enter and exit the sect's forbidden grounds freely. If you are to face a crisis or have matters that cannot be resolved, the sect will assist you the best we can as well. So, would you like to join my Frozen Asgard, and become the first male disciple of my Asgard?" Yoon-chae opened his mouth, and couldn't manage to utter a word for a long while. Originally, the greatest hesitation Yoon-chae had toward joining Frozen Cloud Asgard was the sect's restraint. Every single sect must have their sectoral rules, and as a special sect, Frozen Cloud Asgard had rules much stricter than other sects. Actions being restricted after joining Frozen Cloud Asgard was something that couldn't be any more normal. But Yoon-chae completely didn't expect that Feng Qianhui would actually allow him to ignore the sectoral rules and freely come and go. which meant that he could come as he wished, go as he pleased, and did not need to follow anyone's orders. Yet he would also be free to use any of Frozen Cloud Asgard's resources, and train in all of its core profound arts. As for the two conditions Feng Qianhui made, they were simply no different from having no conditions at all. Such a treatment was simply like pies falling from the sky. Only needed to reap as one wished, while not needing to sow. Not sparing to break the 1,000 years of Frozen Cloud Asgard sectoral rules to recruit a male disciple like him, while also giving such a treatment, what Yunche felt right now was only an endless sense of unrealisticness. Gong Yuxian, who was beside him more so, revealed deeper and deeper astonishment and wanted to speak up several times, but endured from doing so with all her might. Yunche pondered for a long time, and asked seriously, "Senior, this junior really wants to know what the reason is behind making an exception for me to join Frozen Cloud Asgard, while also giving me such a treatment." Feng Qianhui faintly smiled, "Because of your strength, potential, influence, as well your immeasurable future. Moreover, even though your way of doing things is somewhat extreme, you view loyalty and friendship with extreme importance. This old woman believes that if you were to become my Asgard's disciple, if my Asgard really encounters a great calamity in the future, you will definitely protect my Frozen Cloud Asgard with all your power. Are you satisfied with this explanation?" Feng Qianhui's tone was flat and sincere, the expression in her eyes was more so as pure as a clear spring. Yunche did not sense any impurity, deception, and fakery from within. This time, Yunche no longer hesitated, and couldn't find any reason to hesitate either. He spoke while nodding, "Okay. Granted, with Senior's kindness, Junior Yunche is willing to join Frozen Cloud Asgard, and become Frozen Cloud Asgard's disciple. But before entering Frozen Cloud Asgard, this junior has a request. Even though this junior is sectless, he already has a master. Thus, without master's agreement, this junior cannot acknowledge another master." "Ha ha." Feng Qianhui faintly smiled, "It's fine. With your aptitude and strength, there is no one worthy to be your master in my Asgard anyway. You do not need to acknowledge anyone as master, and can just directly join the sect. If you are to be interested in my Asgard's profound arts, Qin Yu can directly instruct you." But in Feng Qianhui's view, Yunche simply wasn't suited for ice-attributed profound arts at all with the phoenix's bloodline in his body, and wouldn't choose to spare the energy to learn ice-attributed profound arts that completely conflicted with his phoenix flames. Since the words were already like this, if Yunche still didn't agree, then he would even think himself as an idiot. He knelt down on one knee, and said respectfully, "Junior Yunche is willing to join Frozen Cloud Asgard, become Frozen Cloud Asgard's disciple, and from now on, share honor and disgrace with Frozen Cloud Asgard. If the sect faces a crisis, Yunche will definitely return to the sect at the first moment, and defend the sect with all his power." "Good." Feng Qianhui heavily nodded as deep gratification flashed within her eyes. She raised up her fingers, and pressed at nothingness. Instantly, a marble of cold crystal appeared on the tip of her fingers, then flew toward Yunche. After touching his arm, it directly disappeared on the surface of his body like a melting snowflake. "This is my Asgard's unique Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal. With the Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal on you, you are now my Frozen Cloud Asgard's official disciple. At the same time, the Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal of every single Frozen Cloud disciple will sense one another. This is the identification as my Asgard's disciple, as well as to distinguish fellow sect members. The Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal doesn't cause any harm to the body. If you wish to leave Frozen Cloud Asgard one day, you may voluntarily erase it at any time." After the Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal entered his body, Yunche quickly felt a corresponding presence from Gong Yuxian and Xie Qingyue's body. After coming to Frozen Cloud Asgard with uncertainty in his mind, he'd actually became Frozen Cloud Asgard's official disciple just like that. Such a result made Yunche somewhat feel that it was a little bit illusory. "Yunche, since you have already joined my Frozen Cloud Asgard, then, as the Grand Asgard Mistress, there are some things I need to warn you about." Feng Qianhui spoke. Yunche nodded. "I asked Grand Asgard Mistress to educate me." Feng Qianhui went silent for a bit, then spoke with a solemn expression. "I heard that 2 years ago at the Blue Wind Ranking Tournament, one of the 4 great sacred grounds, Mighty Heavenly Sword Region's elder Ling Kuan, had taken the initiative in inviting you to join Mighty Heavenly Sword region. You did not give an answer at the time, but had still kept Ling Kuan's sound transmission imprint. I want to know, in the future, will there be the possibility of you joining Mighty Heavenly Sword region? Yun Che murmured for a while, pondering the reason why Feng Qianhui would mention this matter. Because of Yun Songhai's death, because of Xiao Ying's death, because of his birth parents, Yun Che's hatred toward Mighty Heavenly Sword region was already carved into his bones. However, with his current abilities, he wasn't qualified in the slightest to contend with Mighty Heavenly Sword region. Thus, his hatred absolutely could not be revealed in front of anyone. While calm on the surface, he said hesitatingly, Mighty Heavenly Sword region is after all, one of the 4 great sacred grounds, a place at the greatest pinnacle of the profound sky continent. Everyone under this sky who practices the profound, all wish in their dreams that they could enter one of the sacred grounds. This junior likes freedom, but if a bottleneck is encountered in the future, perhaps there would be the possibility of me entering Mighty Heavenly Sword region to search for ways to break through. Feng Qianhui went silent, then let out a faint sigh, and said, if you are to possibly enter one of the sacred grounds in the future, that would indeed be your opportunity and good fortune. However, out of Absolute Monarch Sanctuary, Supreme Ocean Palace, Sun Moon Divine Hall, you can choose one of these 3 if you had the chance. It is only Mighty Heavenly Sword region that you definitely shouldn't choose. Why is that? Yun Che asked in surprise. Your aptitude is extremely great, your disposition more so is extremely fitting to seek the profound way's limit. Moreover, extremely great fortune had always accompanied you. Your future will be limitless. However, even though Mighty Heavenly Sword region is a sacred ground, it is a ground filled with countless foul and filth. I definitely won't allow disciples of my sect be tainted by Mighty Heavenly Sword region's filth in the future, and have their entire life's future prospects be destroyed. Feng Qianhui's words made Yun Che astonished in his heart. Grandest Guard Mistress, could it be that there are some special grievances between Frozen Cloudus Guard and Mighty Heavenly Sword region? This disciple very rarely hears of the name, Mighty Heavenly Sword region, but hadn't ever heard any dreadful rumors of it. I hope that Grandest Guard Mistress can enlighten me. Feng Qianhui took a deep glance at Yun Che as a struggling expression flashed through the depths of her eyes. She naturally knew just what an olive branch given by a sacred ground meant to a profound practitioner. That was entirely the highest aspiration of profound practitioners cultivating in the way of the profound. If there was not enough reason, there simply wouldn't be anyone who would refuse a sacred ground's olive branch. After a long hesitation, Feng Qianhui secretly sighed, and spoke in the end. Did you know that before 1,000 years ago, there weren't only 4 sacred grounds in the profound sky continent, and instead were 5 great sacred grounds? Yun Che was surprised once again. He had always only heard of the 4 great sacred grounds name, and had never heard of some 5 great sacred grounds. And the time that 5 great sacred grounds had existed was 1,000 years ago. In terms of sectoral development, 1,000 years wasn't a very long period of history. It was especially true for forces on the level of sacred grounds, and shouldn't have been forgotten in 1,000 years at all. Yet, Yun Che had never heard of the 5th sacred ground. 1,000 years ago, other than Absolute Monarch Sanctuary, Supreme Ocean Palace, Sun Moon Divine Hall, and Mighty Heavenly Sword region, the profound sky continent still had another sacred ground level force. Its name was Eternal Night Royal Family. The 5 great forces are altogether called the 5 great sacred grounds. Eternal Night Royal Family? This was the first time Yun Che had ever heard this name. The 5 great sacred grounds existed long before the profound sky 7 nations. They had already existed for many millennia, so much that they might possibly have lasted longer than over 10,000 years. Even though the 5 great sacred grounds have always mutually balanced and restricted one another, on the surface, they had also mutually supported and were united. Moreover, they had the same principles, which were to protect the profound sky continent and prevent the invasion of foreign powers. They were the entire continent's largest, most important barriers that simultaneously did not interfere with any of the continent's internal disputes. As a result, they have received the entire continent's admiration, reverence, and were even deified like gods, but this did not mean that they were all good people. Feng Qianhui raised her eyes to look at Yunche, and said calmly, I originally should have no right to judge whether or not those from the sacred grounds are good or evil, right or wrong, but my sect's disciples never being allowed to get close to those from mighty heavenly sword region was one of the wishes left behind by a deceased frozen cloud ancestor. Because that year, the eternal night royals had all died due to the malicious plotting of mighty heavenly sword region. Yunche? Among the 5 great sacred grounds, the eternal night royal family was the only family-oriented force. Unless they have taken in a wife, they would never recruit outsiders. Thus, the most firmly united force within the 5 great sacred grounds was the eternal night royal family. Even though there may be some friction amongst the 5 great sacred grounds, there had never been great grievances. However, 1,000 years ago, mighty heavenly sword region's new sword master, who is also the current sword master Shenyuan Wentian, assumed his position. On one day several tens of years after he assumed his position, the surrounding little towns near the core location of the Eternal Night Royals base were suddenly enveloped in a black fog overnight. Everyone within the towns, regardless of whether they were powerful profound practitioners or the untutored elderly, women, and children, they all violently died within the black fog. Very quickly, all the blame and criticism were aimed at the Eternal Night Royals, because when the Eternal Night Royal family's core profound arts, the Eternal Night Illusory God Record, was activated, there was precisely a black mist that coiled around the body. Those who died under the Eternal Night Illusory God Record also released black mist that coiled out from their bodies, that would not dissipate until several days later. After listening to here, Yunche more or less understood what had happened. When the name Shenyun Wentian came out from Feng Qianhui's mouth, it had tightened Yunche's heart even more. Because his grandfather, Yun Sanghai, had precisely suffered under Shenyuan Wentian's hands. Yun Sanghai's lord and friend, the illusory demon realm's demon emperor, had also died under Shenyuan Wentian's hands. He said softly, could it be a framing? Right, this was a malicious framing. At that time, aside from the one who had framed them, no one knew that this was a framing. Feng Qianhui continued, soon after, mighty heavenly sword region was the first to voice out, saying that the Eternal Night Royal family was a sinful devil clan who increased their devil powers by massacring innocents. Then, in the name of protecting the profound sky continent and eliminating evil, they allied with the other 3 sacred grounds and annihilated the Eternal Night Royal family. Even though the Eternal Night Royal family was powerful, they simply were not able to withstand the combined forces of the 4 great sacred grounds and were ultimately exterminated. At the very end, only the king of the Eternal Night Royal family was left, and under his extreme resentment and sorrow, he suddenly devilized. Devilized? Yes. Once all sorts of negative emotions reached their pinnacle, one's own power regulations would also have the possibility to be negative and would thus become an awful negative power. This kind of rumor had already existed long, long ago, but the Eternal Night King was actually the first to devilize in the true meaning, which proved that the rumor wasn't false at all. After all, for his entire clan to be annihilated, and his wife and children cruelly murdered, he would inevitably denounce the entire world, and hate the heavens and earth. His devilization truly solidified him being called a devil, which made him die from the combined forces of the leaders of the 4 sacred grounds. After his devilization, a great change occurred to his soul. His body had been destroyed, but his soul actually did not dissipate for a long time, and was even incapable of being destroyed. Thus, Sun Moon Divine Hall used the soul-sealing coffin to seal off the hostile spirit of the Eternal Night King. As for the only key that could open the soul-sealing coffin, it had been discarded more than 10,000 miles away, not allowing the hate-filled soul of the Eternal Night King be able to be free. But now that 1,000 years had already passed, the hate-filled soul of the Eternal Night King should have dissipated by now. Yunche propped up his chin with his hand and asked, why did mighty heavenly sword region want to frame the Eternal Night Royal family? How did this benefit mighty heavenly sword region? Since you know the truth, then didn't it mean that the other 3 sacred grounds already know about the truth as well? Because of the sword that the Eternal Night Royal family was guarding, Heavenly Sin Divine Sword. Feng Qianhui continued, Shenyuan Wentian is an extremely ambitious man. He wholeheartedly wants to be unequaled under the heavens and become the world's only master. The Heavenly Sin Divine Sword is a divine sword the Eternal Night Royal family had been guarding for many generations, and is the only sovereign profound sword, the monarch of swords. It was rumored that the force that could control the heavenly sin divine sword would be unrivaled within the profound sky continent. Only, even after several millennia, there was never anyone within the eternal night royal family that was able to master the heavenly sin divine sword. Since mighty heavenly sword region's main weapon was a sword, and honored the sword, members of mighty heavenly sword region had long since longed for the heavenly sin divine sword. Xian Yuan Wentian, even more so, frantically wanted to take the sword for himself, which thus ended up in the malicious framing and the extermination of the eternal night royals. After that incident, the heavenly sin divine sword vanished without a trace. No one knew where it was, and the most probable estimation would be that it had already fallen into Xian Yuan Wentian's hands a long time ago. Not long after, the other three sacred grounds naturally suspected this, and realized that this was probably mighty heavenly sword region's conspiracy, that they had wrongfully annihilated the eternal night royals. Since they were sacred grounds, even though they knew that it was extremely possible that they were wrong, even if they had been used by another, they could still only accept their mistake. They absolutely could not allow the name of the sacred grounds to be sullied. As a result, they absolutely could not clear the Eternal Night Royal family's name, and even publicly proclaimed that the Eternal Night Royal family was a sinful devil clan. In order to prevent this being traced back by later generations, they had even gradually erased all written records and traces of the Eternal Night Royal family's existence within the entire continent. Now that 1,000 years have passed, the Eternal Night Royal family name had long since been forgotten due to the concealment of the sacred grounds. It would only be randomly found within written accounts of sects that have lasted for more than a millennium. These few words said by Feng Qianhui was probably the behind-the-scenes story that barely anyone from other regions would have heard. Yun Che naturally knew why Feng Qianhui would tell him all these. He pondered for a while, then said, "Grandest Guard Mistress, may this disciple offend you to ask you why our sect would have such a thorough and detailed written account of not only the grievances between the sacred grounds 1,000 years ago, but also the forbidden truth that was cooperatively concealed by all four of the sacred grounds. Because the Eternal Night Queen had previously saved the life of our frozen cloud ancestor, Mu Bingyun. Even though the Eternal Night Queen's profound strength had reached the pinnacle and her status was incomparably respected, she was still gentle and kind-hearted. Not only did she rescue our frozen cloud ancestor from the claws of a tyrant profound beast, she'd even bestowed its profound core to our frozen cloud ancestor after killing that tyrant profound beast, and also gave many directions that benefited our frozen cloud ancestor through her entire life. If it weren't for the Eternal Night Queen's rescue and guidance, then our frozen cloud ancestor wouldn't have made such great accomplishments that enabled her to look down at everyone in Blue Wind, and you could even say that if it weren't for her, there wouldn't be today's frozen cloud Asgard. Because our frozen cloud ancestor regarded the Eternal Night Queen as one of noble virtue and a benefactor, she never believed that the Eternal Night Royal family was a sinful devil clan. But our frozen cloud ancestor did not have the power to help the Eternal Night Royal family right wrongs and avenge them, so she had no other choice but to preserve the true facts and pass them on within frozen cloud Asgard, to prevent the truth from ever disappearing, while also alerting all frozen cloud disciples to never associate with mighty heavenly sword region. At present, mighty heavenly sword region's sword master is still Xian Yuan Wentian. With such an ambitious sword master who is this despicable and malicious, one could imagine just how filthy mighty heavenly sword region is. If you join mighty heavenly sword region in the future, my frozen cloud Asgard will cut off all relations with you. Feng Qianhui said solemnly. Yun Che was very clear about the ambitiousness of mighty heavenly sword region. If they weren't, his biological parents would not have been hunted down, his grandfather would not have died, and he would not have been stranded in floating Cloud City 19 years ago. It was just that Feng Qianhui was not aware of these grievances. Yun Che's heart hopped up and down as he said earnestly, "I thank Grandest Guard Mistress for enlightening me, this disciple shall engrave it into his memory." Good. Feng Qianhui nodded slowly, "You must by all means avoid mentioning everything I've told you to others. Me telling you about this means that I believe that you can differentiate between good and evil, and separate trivial matters from the serious." Additionally, her gaze swept across Yun Che and Xia Qingyu. Even though you and Qingyu are husband and wife in name, you are not allowed to truly become husband and wife until Qingyu has completely cultivated the frozen end divine arts. The yin energy within a female's body greatly helps the cultivation of ice attribute profound arts. If she loses her virgin vital yin, Qingyue's frozen end divine art cultivation would inevitably be detained, and even a bottleneck, which she would be incapable of breaking through in her entire life, could appear. Qingyu is my frozen cloud Asgard's future hope, and I definitely will not allow such a mishap. I believe that you also can judge the severity of this matter. Xia Qingyu can't do anything before frozen end divine arts has been completely perfected. In other words, it'll be totally okay once it's been completely perfected. Yunche was originally worried that frozen cloud Asgard would make it mandatory for Xia Qingyu to retain her vital yin throughout her entire life, but this warning from Feng Qianhui was simply an undisguised hint. He hurriedly replied, "Yes, this disciple will sincerely comply with Grand Asgard Mistress' instructions." Good. Feng Qianhui slowly nodded as her face revealed a smile. "I have already finished saying what I ought to have said. I confess, even though you are my Asgard's first male disciple in all of our history, I am deeply comforted by the fact that you have become a member. After all, Blue Wind's two great young talents have both assembled at my frozen cloud Asgard. Temporarily, we shall not disclose your joining of our frozen Asgard today, and will inform the entire sect during tomorrow's sect assembly. If there is nothing else to be said, Qingyu, take Yunche on a stroll within our frozen Asgard. Any place that you can go to, you may bring him there as well. Yuxian, you stay here." "Yes." Xia Qingyu got up, gave Feng Qianhui a salutation, and then left with Yunche. As soon as they left, Gong Yuxian got up and asked hurriedly, "Senior Master, why exactly did you make such a decision today? Is it truly because of the simple fact of Yunche's strength and influence?" Feng Qianhui had on a deep expression. She raised her head slightly, and answered with a voice that sounded like a sorrowful sigh, "Yuxian, do you still remember the 1,000-year prophecy our frozen cloud ancestor had left behind that year?" Gong Yuxian stared blankly, then her eyes trembled acutely, and her complexion also changed. Could Senior Master be referring to the 1,000-year calamity? "Yes." Feng Qianhui closed her eyes, her expression serene. "In those days, frozen cloud Asgard's mistress and a wanderer of Black Fiend Empire's Heaven's Fate clan were close friends. At that time, the Heaven's Fate clan was at its peak. They were about to see through Heaven's way and clearly discern Heaven's fate. It was highly inappropriate to be able to discern Heaven's fate, and ultimately, they had met judgment from Heaven's way, and were annihilated. When the frozen cloud ancestor founded frozen cloud Asgard, the Heaven's Fate wanderer had previously seen through Heaven's fate, and informed our ancestor of our frozen cloud Asgard's 1,000 years of glory, as well as the great calamity that would come after 1,000 years. If this calamity were to be weathered, frozen cloud Asgard would have 10,000 years of prosperity. If not, the name frozen cloud Asgard would no longer appear in this world. And in terms of time, the 1,000-year date has already arrived. From nearly 1 year ago, I had always been ill at ease, and was even haunted by nightmares non-stop when resting my mind. In addition to that, such a disciple with abnormally high aptitude like Xia Qingyu suddenly emerged in my frozen cloud Asgard, and the frozen end divine arts that went silent for 1,000 years resurfaced in the world as well. The various abnormalities were seemingly all hinting the arrival of the 1,000-year calamity. Gong Yuxian's expression was in sudden turmoil. She slowly sat down. "So the reason why Senior Master did not spare to break our sect's rules and allowed Yunche to join our frozen cloud Asgard, was always so we could have an additional force of resistance in response to the possibility of a great calamity." Feng Qianhui sighed. "Compared to the survival of our sect, what is breaking a sect rule? Sigh, I only hope that if the 1,000-year calamity really arrives, the heavens will assist my frozen cloud. Divine Hall. Xiao sect and Burning Heaven clan disciples all number no less than several tens of thousands, so many that there were probably more than 100,000. If one added the branch sects and outer clans, the number would be even harder to predict. From top to bottom, Heavenly Sword Villa had more than a few 100,000. Compared to that, the equally famous Frozen Cloud Asgard was far more pocket-sized. Added up altogether, the entire Frozen Cloud Asgard had a total of roughly 2,000 members. However, Frozen Cloud Asgard's main hall was still especially wide and roomy, so vast that it could accommodate several thousand disciples. The surrounding ice peaks varied in height, and different-shaped profound ice stood in great numbers. Even a random block of profound ice here, perhaps had 1,000, or even 10,000 years of history. Every building here were nearly all constructed out of ice crystals. It was practically impossible to not see the chilled snowflake grass everywhere, and every one of them were incomparably precious. Yun-Che followed Xie Qingyu for an hour, yet actually did not encounter any frozen cloud disciples. Every frozen cloud disciple had their own private housing and training room. Moreover, a majority of their temperaments were ice cold, so even if it was within the sect, it was very rare for them to show their face. Isn't this place a bit too quiet? To have stayed in this place for so many years, you don't feel bored? Yun-Che looked at his surroundings, unable to help but utter that out. The landscape here was so pure that it was close to illusory, as if one had walked into paradise. Occasionally admiring the scenery was obviously not bad, but if Yun-Che had to stay in this cold and desolate place forever, it wasn't known how long until he would suffocate to death. Xie Qingyu said softly, "The cultivation of my sect's frozen cloud art and frozen heart art all stress about being ice cold and tranquil. Cultivating here could not be even more perfect. This kind of environment suits me, and is not much different from how I lived life before I joined Frozen Cloud Asgard." Before joining Frozen Cloud Asgard, Xie Qingyu also stayed in her room for a long time and stepped out of the family residence very infrequently. Even Yun-Che, whom she had an engagement with since she was a child, only saw her a few times in more than 10 years. Everyone in Frozen Cloud Asgard has their own private housing and training room. Once Asgard Mistress has announced news of your joining my sect tomorrow, your own housing and training room will be arranged. Xie Qingyu slightly shifted her gaze and glanced at Yun-Che. "Only if you want it." "Want it? Of course I want it." Yun-Che immediately replied, "Currently, the price of housing is so expensive, only an idiot wouldn't want a free house." "Oh right, Qingyu my wife, where is your housing and training room? We've been married for so many years, not sleeping together is fine, but I don't even know where you sleep." Xie Qingyu tilted her head, looking at the ice crystal corals that brightly reflected colored lights. "My training room's a bit special. After I finally comprehended Frozen End Divine Arts, the mistress allowed me to cultivate at the Frozen Cloud secret ground inscribed with Frozen End Divine Arts." Frozen End Divine Arts, the tip of Yun-Che's brows twitched. In this past month, he had often thought about his wedding day with Kang Yu, the scene of how Xie Qingyu held back two great Emperor Profounds from the Divine Phoenix sect, froze their flame, and sealed their movements. The flames released from those two great Emperor Profounds were Phoenix flames ignited from the Phoenix bloodline. Yet they had been frozen over by Xie Qingyu of the same level. This completely signified that Frozen and Divine Art's might and level of laws were actually even higher, or at least, not lower than Phoenix flames. Of course, those Phoenix flames were not pure. Phoenix flames released from the Divine Phoenix, and were rather profound fire with a bit of the Phoenix attribute ignited from those who have inherited the Phoenix bloodline. However, even if they were not pure Phoenix flames, ordinary profound fire absolutely could not compare to them. Otherwise, the Divine Phoenix sect would not have become the #1 great sect within the profound Sky 7 nations. "Bring me to that Frozen Cloud secret ground you're talking about to have a look. I suddenly want to see our sect's Frozen and Divine Arts." Feng Qianhui had said so previously that as long as it was a place Xie Qingyu was allowed to go to, he could also go as well. Xie Qingyu did not refuse, and directly said, "If that's the case, then follow me." The Frozen Cloud secret ground that Xie Qingyu referred to was at the east side of Frozen Cloud Asgard, and Yun-Che followed Xie Qingyu down a flight of ice crystal steps for a long while. Xie Qingyu's eyes were liquid ice, graceful and quiet as they unwaveringly gazed forward. Yun-Che used some time to check out the surrounding decorations and landscape, and a large majority of the time to gaze at Xie Qingyu's complexion and figure. The first time he had met Xie Qingyu, she was not yet 10, yet he felt that she was beautiful to the point of obscurity, beautiful to the point of being unreal. Now that he looked at the Xie Qingyu who was almost within reach, he still felt the same way. Marrying a woman beautiful to the point of illusory, who was also Blue Wind's #1 beauty, was naturally what men dreamed of having. But she was obviously his wife, and they had been married for 3 years, yet they had never truly become husband and wife in the true meaning. As a typical man, saying that Yunche did not have any of an ordinary man's disgruntlement was impossible. Cough, cough, Yunche suddenly opened his mouth and said seriously, Qingyu, my wife, Grandest Guard Mistress said that we cannot be husband and wife in the true meaning until you have perfectly completed frozen and divine arts. How do you feel about that? Xie Qingyu continued to lightly step ahead of Yunche. There was not the slightest of response, as if she simply did not hear what he had said. How about I change the question? Yunche's gaze scrolled from top to bottom, firmly staring at Xie Qingyu's perfectly curved delicate body that was like a fairy from the palace in the moon. He couldn't help but quietly gulp down a mouthful of saliva. When will you completely perfect frozen and divine art? Xie Qingyu still did not react, but if Yunche walked in front of her, he would have seen the snowy clothes on top of her erect chest heavily move up and down. Because the main point of Yunche's question was, when are you going to sleep with me? Qingyu, my wife, please do not think that this is only a small matter. Between a husband and wife, this question is extremely important. Yunche said with a grave face, becoming a genuine married couple is not just the binding of name and emotions, it also requires the merging of body and spirit. And as for the merging of bodies, it even needs both the husband and wife. We are already here. For words that sounded like the sound of falling ice crystals interrupted Yunche's speech. Xie Qingyu's footsteps had already stopped in front of a large ice crystal gate that emitted a dense white mist. Xie Qingyu extended a palm, pressing it atop the ice crystal gate. A blue light flickered in the center of her palm, and after a light sound of displacement, the originally tightly closed ice crystal gate silently opened. A piercing coldness assaulted the face, and what emerged in front of them was an especially spacious great hall. But the walls and bricks of this great hall were actually not made of cold ice, rather, they were made up of a deep blue-green stone. The cold air that came from straight up ahead carried a vaguely familiar fragrance. It was the scent of a woman that solely belonged to Xie Qingyu. It seemed that Xie Qingyu spent most of her time here. This hall is called the Frozen and Divine Hall. It is the place where our frozen cloud ancestor cultivated, and also the place where our frozen cloud ancestor departed the mortal realm. Xie Qingyu slowly walked in, her voice was slow and gentle, as if all those nonsensical words Yunche had said earlier did not enter her consciousness. Yunche slanted his mouth and reached out towards Xie Qingyu's butt, making a grabbing motion in the space between them. This made him feel a bit better, then he followed Xie Qingyu instead. The great hall was wide and empty, the floor, walls, and ceiling were all made of uniformly placed bluestone. The color of these bluestone were deep yet translucent, they slightly reflected light, and resembled dark jade. But apart from this, the entire great hall was completely empty, not even a seat or light stand was anywhere in sight. You usually cultivating here? This place doesn't seem all that special. Yunche swept his gaze everywhere as he said that, then, his gaze suddenly fell upon the most right side of the great hall, and fixed there, as he asked, what's that? On the far right side of the great hall was a round, ring-like budge that was 3 meters wide and half a foot long. Its color was no different from the great hall, and it could even be said that it would be overlooked at first glance. From Yunche's position, some special pattern seemed to be engraved upon the protrusion. That is the profound escape formation that the frozen cloud ancestor had left behind. Xie Qingyu slightly slanted her beautiful eyes. If the sect encounters an unforeseen incident and is at the end of its ropes, one could use frozen cloud arts to awaken this profound formation. This profound formation contains a space-splitting power, and after this formation has been set in motion, it could send someone to an unpredictable region. However, it could only transfer one person, and once this formation has been activated, it requires 100 years of time to absorb enough power so it could once again split space. In other words, if this formation were to be used, we must wait 100 years to use it again. But ever since Frozen Cloud Asgard has come to existence to now, this profound escape formation had never been used before. Oh, Yunche looked at the strange profound formation a few more times. He didn't expect that there existed such a profound escape formation that would cut open space and let someone flee thousands of miles away if they had to, within Frozen Cloud Asgard. You said before that Frozen and Divine Art's profound formula is inscribed here, but this place obviously does not have it. Yunche said while shifting his gaze. Xie Qingyu didn't speak. She raised her arms, and her white jade palms shone with an ice-cold, light blue radiance. The originally bright and clean bluestone wall in front of them suddenly reflected rows of azure blue writing. On the rightmost side of the text were 4 large words that released an ice-cold soul-terrorizing light, which seemed to have been put together by ice crystals. Frozen and divine art. Xia Qingyu lowered her arms, and the blue light in her hands faded, as the words on the wall also completely faded away. She said in a soft voice, only when using the illumination of the light from frozen cloud arts would the inscription of the frozen and divine arts appear. If one was not a frozen cloud disciple, even if they came here, they would not be able to obtain the frozen and divine art's profound formula. So that's how it is. Yunche instantly understood. Additionally, the blue stone within this hall is called the heavenly firm jade. It has been said that it is a divine stone that had been nourished by a true god's power in the primordial era. Incomparably hard and solid, slicing it would leave no lines, it would not crack if frozen, and not melt if burned by fire. Even the power from a peak emperor profound is incapable of doing it any harm. Thus, when training in this sort of place, you can practice any kind of technique, and not have to worry about destroying anything. Even a peak emperor profound is unable to break it. Yunche lowered his head to look at the stone beneath his feet with an unconvinced expression. However, he couldn't find any signs of damage in the blue-green stone anywhere in sight. Forget about a nick, he couldn't even find a minute scratch. This stone, was it really as durable as Xia Qingyu had said it was? Without thinking or giving Xia Qingyu prior notice, Yunche grabbed onto Dragon Fault and casually smashed downward. Clang! He had obviously smashed atop the jade stone, yet Yunche clearly felt as if he had smashed Dragon Fault against an incomparably hard steel plate. An ear-piercing sound resounded, and the 10,000 or so kilogram Dragon Fault had actually been directly bounced back, even so much that the vibration made Yunche's wrist feel a little numb. And the spot where Dragon Fault had slammed into was unexpectedly completely undamaged, even the smallest sliver of cuts that could be seen with the naked eye did not appear. Yunche stared blankly for a while. His arm strength was incomparable, and Dragon Fault was even a powerful emperor profound heavy sword. Normally, there was nothing they could not overcome, and no one could obstruct them. Let alone some kind of rock, he could even collapse a small mountain in one strike. But now, he actually could not leave the slightest vestige of damage on this block of rock. The corner of Yunche's mouth twitched, and Dragon Fault also released an impatient dragon cry. As a mighty emperor profound heavy sword, it actually was incapable of leaving behind any mark on this piece of rock. Even if Yunche was willing to resign himself, its conscience would never accept it. I just won't believe it. A burst of air came from within Yunche's chest, as if it was unable to be suppressed any longer. Both his hands gripped Dragon Fault, burning heart, opened, and with a loud roar, he directly smashed down with 90% of his strength. Ha! Clang! Space quaked, yet the ground did not tremble in the slightest. The instant Dragon Fault collided with the heavenly firm jade, an extremely ear-piercing sound nearly tore apart Yunche's eardrums, and an enormous rebounding vibration came toppling over. It lifted Yunche's arms, made him retreat several steps, and made the blood and energy within his entire body bubble. Even Dragon Fault had nearly been thrown out of his grasp. And, the spot on the ground where Dragon Fault had smashed into, still did not have the least bit of a cut. This time, Yunche was completely dumbstruck. The hell? How can there be a rock as hard as this? The might of a sword strike under 90% of Yunche's strength was naturally nothing humble. Xia Qingyu was forced 30 meters of distance away, and she silently looked at Yunche, who appeared to be in a slightly sorry state, lacking anything to say. Yunche put away the Dragon Fault, flung his arms that were more than halfway numb as if nothing happened, and spoke without appearing to lose his cool. I tried it, this stone is indeed very tough, as expected of the place that frozen cloud ancestor took a liking to. If this place can be sealed up, it'll simply be the safest spot within the entire blue wind. Even if the entire heavenly sword villa came, it's guaranteed that they wouldn't be able to barge in. As he finished speaking, Yunche turned toward the wall where frozen and divine arts were engraved, extended his hands and silently channeled frozen cloud arts. As blue light flashed within his hands, the ice blue colored words quickly emerged from the green colored wall. I heard that other than frozen cloud ancestor back then, in these 1,000 years, only Qingyu my wife could comprehend and practice frozen and divine arts. This can prove two things. It shows that Qingyu my wife is very amazing, and also proves that frozen and divine arts are indeed very mysterious. Frozen and divine arts profound formula has already begun to engrave inside his vision. Let me take a good look at what it's made of. Frozen and divine arts, main formula, ice, extremity of water, extremity of coldness. All things under heaven can become ice, water can be frozen into ice, blood can be frozen into ice, energy can be frozen into ice, the profound can be frozen into ice. Mountains, hills, and the skies all can be frozen into ice. Frozen and divine arts profound formula appears to be simple and frank, yet also seems immensely profound. And looking with a glance, it didn't seem like some powerful profound formula at all, and was instead just an ineffable and superfluous text. At first, Yunche only wanted to simply take a look at this mysterious frozen and profound art, but after the profound formula entered his eyes, entered his heart, and entered his soul, his entire person actually had already unwittingly been immersed within. His expression also became increasingly tranquil and blank. Afterwards, when he was completely sunk within it, even his six senses were unconsciously shut off, as he even forgot about Xie Qingyu who was beside him. Frozen and divine arts profound formula entered his heart through his eyes. Within Yunche's world of consciousness, there seemed to be a voice slowly reading the frozen and divine arts profound formula, as he firmly engraved this voice into his mind. Gradually, he felt the water-attributed heretic god's seed that had been silent most of the time suddenly become active, as if it smelled some kind of presence it thirsted for. Yunche still had a leisurely expression one moment before, yet in the next moment, he suddenly entered a state of vacancy while looking at the wall. Surprised in her heart, Xie Qingyu did not utter any sound to disturb Yunche, as a deep expression of astonishment condensed on her face. Frozen and divine arts profound formula was incomparably abstruse. It embodied the most fundamental, most comprehensive, yet toughest to thoroughly grasp laws regarding the energy of ice. When frozen cloud disciples made contact with it for the first time, facing this pile of profound formula, the only feeling they had was that it was unintelligible. In order to comprehend the frozen and divine arts, Xie Qingyu did not spare to stay several months under the fourth layer of ice hell. Only by submerging herself inside profound ice, did she finally comprehend the ice attribute energy's core natural laws in a gradual fashion, and successfully cultivate the frozen and divine arts. Yunche had only made contact with it for the first time, and what he ordinarily used was nevertheless fire attributed profound energy conflicting with ice attribute. He actually entered the comprehension state just like that. The water attribute heretic god's seed faintly cried in excitement within Yunche's profound veins, and slowly began to whirl. And at this time, a stretch of circular-shaped fog of ice suddenly condensed surrounding him, then dispersed out like ripples, carrying up a wave of unhurried chilly wind. Very quickly, the second ball of ice fog condensed once again around Yunche, but this time, the ice fog did not disperse for a long time. Gradually, as a hint of blue light flashed, an ice spirit suddenly appeared within the ice fog, and started to flutter around Yunche's body as if it was alive. Xie Qingyue's pink lips slightly opened, as her charming eyes shone with a glint of disbelief. This ice spirit wasn't an ordinary ice crystal condensed by the frozen cloud art's cold energy, but the spirit of ice formed when frozen and divine art's first stage is completely mastered. And from when Yunche started to comprehend the frozen and divine arts, not even a mere hour had passed. A supreme ice-attributed profound art that no one in the frozen cloud immortal palace was able to comprehend within these 1,000 years, and even required several months to thoroughly comprehend even with Xie Qingyue's comprehensive abilities. Yunche had actually only used less than an hour to directly complete the elementary stage. Xie Qingyue's eyes stared at Yunche in a daze. She wondered just how many more inexplicable secrets there were on this man who was her husband in name only. Actually, in terms of comprehensive ability, though Yunche's was definitely high, it wouldn't surpass Xie Qingyue's. However, there was the heretic god seed of water in Yunche's body. Ice was one of the forms of water. In order to comprehend frozen and divine arts, one first needed to reach an extremely high level of understanding toward the natural laws of ice. And Yunche, who possessed the water attribute heretic god's seed, had complete affinity with the water element. His understanding of the laws of ice had reached the most extreme limit as well. As such, the threshold and hindrance of cultivating frozen and divine arts was simply non-existent for Yun-Che. At the same time, the speed of total comprehension of a profound formula and imprinting it into the soul also had a most direct relationship with one's soul power. Yun-Che possessed the dragon god soul in his body, and even though he couldn't display too abnormal of a soul power because of the restriction of his profound strength, it was definitely not at a level that ordinary people could compare to. With the existence of the dragon god soul, it can be said without the slightest exaggeration that it would be nearly impossible to find any profound formula that Yun-Che couldn't comprehend and handle within the entire blue wind. Another hour passed, the ice spirits surrounding Yun-Che gradually increased in numbers. From 1 to a dozen, then to several dozens, and hundreds. After imprinting all of the frozen and divine arts profound formula into his mind and soul, Yun-Che had also already closed his eyes. At this moment, his body suddenly emitted a wave of cold energy that pierced the bones and bored at the soul. At the same time, lines of silk formed by ice crystals quickly extended outwards from various spots on his body. Not long after, these ice crystal silks intertwined around his body, forming into an increasingly bigger and denser net of ice. The Yun-Che now had clearly already entered an oblivious state with all 6 senses shut off. This kind of state could be said as the utmost state for comprehension, and absolutely shouldn't be disturbed in any way. Xie Qingyu slowly floated up, and after looking at him for a while, she left without any sound. Under this kind of extreme comprehension state, one wouldn't feel the lapse of time at all, and continuing for several days, or even several dozens of days couldn't be more normal. And if it were at an extraordinarily high level, such a state could even make one unwittingly immerse themselves for several years, to even several hundred years. However, the amount of time that Yun-Che's comprehension lasted this time wasn't as long as Xie Qingyu had expected. The cold moon hid behind the cloud. As the entire frozen cloud immortal palace was completely shrouded by a boundless curtain of the night and sunk into desolateness, Yun-Che finally awakened from the comprehension state. Bang! As his eyes opened, all of the ice crystals surrounding him burst apart, becoming a field of ice fragments. Yun-Che spread opened his arms, looked left and right at his hands, and only felt that his entire body was indescribably refreshed and comfortable from head to toe, as if his body had been completely purified by some sort of utterly pure and clean thing. Tree of Frozen End. As Yun-Che uttered a light chant, 2 little trees of ice crystals quickly grew on his 2 palms, unfolding lush branches and leaves of ice. Frozen End Illusory Mirror. Ding! As Yun-Che's 2 hands opened, an almost completely transparent ball-shaped barrier completely enveloped Yun-Che within. Instantly, the cold energy and presence coming from Yun-Che was almost entirely isolated, his voice was more so entirely covered. This profound art of concealment was an unknown time stronger than the frozen cloud barrier, conjured from frozen cloud arts. If the frozen and illusory mirror was opened, Yun-Che believed that even someone 2 entire realms above him, under deliberate searching, would still have great difficulty discovering his hiding location even within a 300-meter area. Yun-Che stopped the frozen and illusory mirror and muttered in a low voice, reaching the 4th stage in one breath, "These frozen and divine arts don't seem to be that difficult either. It really is too much easier when compared to breaking through the star god's broken shadow and the great way of the Buddha." Not to mention other people at Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace, even if the Frozen Cloud ancestor heard these words of Yun-Che's, she would probably spray his face with a mouthful of blood from anger. Heretic God's Seed, and Dragon God's Soul, with various cheats that didn't belong to this plane on him, he actually had the nerve to say these words. Xie Qingyu was already no longer beside him. Yun-Che walked out by himself and exited the underground, and only then did he discover that it was already nighttime. Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace at nighttime was excessively quiet, and not a single person could be seen within view. Even though the moonlight was mostly obstructed by the thin cloud that wouldn't disperse all year round, with the reflecting light of the white snow on land, the lighting wasn't that dim either. Yun-Che instantly somewhat regretted that he didn't ask for the directions to Xie Qingyue's room during daytime. Otherwise, what a perfect opportunity this was. Other than him, there were only females within Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace. Since it was nighttime, it seemed unsuitable for him to go find anyone other than Xie Qingyu. Plus that Gong Yuxian hadn't declared him to be a frozen cloud disciple. Even running into a frozen cloud disciple head-on would probably instigate chaos. Shouting Xie Qingyue's name where he stood? That seemed to be even more out of the question. What should I do now? Don't tell me that I'll have to wait right here until Qingyu, my wife, voluntarily comes to look for me. Yunche stood where he was at and didn't move for a long time. If this were some other place, even if it were one of the 4 great sacred grounds, he would dare to casually stroll for a bit. But this place just happened to be all women. It really wasn't easy to move in the middle of the night. Oh well. Let's return to the Frozen End Divine Hall. Yunche thought grudgingly, turned around and was about to return to the underground. As he just took a step forward, his ears suddenly twitched. To his right, female voices could vaguely be heard. He hastily concentrated his hearing to listen carefully. That was indeed the voice of females, and didn't seem to be just one person. The distance to him was probably only 2,000 or 3,000 feet away. And one of the voices seemed to belong to Chu Yueli. If he could find Chu Yueli, then what happened next would naturally be much easier to manage. Without even thinking about it, Yunche quickly walked toward the origin of the voice. As he neared, the sound beside his ears also became more and more clear. Yueli, is there still no news on senior sister Yu-chan? No, big sister may be worried about the child's safety, and went hermit in a place cut off from the rest of the world. She may even have left Blue Wind Empire. Sigh, I'm really worried about her. Another voice as gentle as water spoke, don't worry, senior sister Yue-chan's profound strength is as great as Emperor Profound. Even though she no longer has profound arts, protecting herself absolutely isn't a problem. I still can't understand, why would senior sister Yu-chan do such a thing with that person called Yunche? Really? How incomprehensible. This was a very lively voice, and seemed to have come from a young lady's mouth. It really isn't understandable at all. Speaking of which, is that Yunche really so amazing? Grand Palace Mistress had always wanted to see him, but why is that? Does senior sister Yueli know? This voice was almost exactly the same as the previous voice. If there weren't a slight difference in the tone, it could easily be thought to have come from a single person's mouth. Yunche walked closer and closer. He didn't deliberately hide his presence, and was naturally quickly discovered by these women. Very soon, their voices started to point toward him. Only, he had just finished practicing Frozen End Divine Arts, and his entire body was radiating with cold energy. Furthermore, he was implanted with Frozen Cloud Soul Crystal, so anyone who was similarly people of the Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace would immediately be able to detect it, and would naturally believe that he was a certain Frozen Cloud Immortal Palace's disciple. And they definitely wouldn't have thought that it would be a man who was walking closer to them. Someone's coming toward here. Eh? This presence seems to be a little unfamiliar. This presence seems to be the Frozen End Divine Arts presence. That's not right, this profound energy presence is clearly only at the 7th level of the Earth Profound Realm, it can't be Qingyu. Everyone, let's guess, which sister or disciple will it be? I'm guessing Ling Xue. No, could it be Suru? It seems like Luluo. The presence really seems somewhat unfamiliar, could it be that a certain sister or disciple is deliberately hiding her presence to tease us? Sister on the outside, come in quickly. If you keep on hiding around, we'll come out and snatch you in, okay? Ahead of Yunche was a door of ice that wasn't tightly shut. Behind the ice door, the voices of 6 females disseminated out. Some were clear and cold, some were gentle, and some were lively and pleasing to the ears. And the words they spoke afterwards made Yunche unable to resist it more and more. He quickly speculated about the possible attitude they would show toward him, then took a step forward, and pushed open the ice door. He opened his lips, but before he could even manage to utter the first word, his entire person entirely went rigid there as if he had been electrocuted. Before his eyes was a pool of water so clear that the bottom could be seen. There was no fog above the pool of water, so it naturally wasn't some hot spring. This was the only natural cold spring that wouldn't freeze even under the cold of the snow region of extreme ice. Within the cold spring were 6 stark naked bodies of jade akin to have been carved out of ice. Their appearances were as if drawn by the otherworldly brush, each one having their own merits, yet were all as beautiful as goddesses, and picturesquely elegant. Their skin was as if congealed from ice and snow, fair without any flaws. Pairs of smooth, clean, graceful and slender charming legs were curled, straightened, gathered together, or raised in various fashions within the water. Amongst the pairs after pairs of towering twin peaks, some were like reversely covered jade bowls, some were as ample as the moon, and some were pressed into a graceful curvature by arms. Everything was sketching out an enchanting scenery that could make men's blood vessels explode in an instant and fish their soul away from their bodies. Episode 55 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.